Thank you very much for the introduction. And yes, my name is Sambeek. I'm a social worker who's worked in the Northern Territory for 10 years in both remote communities and in Darwin urban communities, Aboriginal communities. So I feel enormously grateful to be presenting here and doing the work that I do. It's a privilege that I don't take very lightly. I'd like to acknowledge all the elders that have shown me the way in this work. I'm not Aboriginal, but I have beautiful people working alongside me, and I wish they were here with me today, but hopefully they're surrounding me. I'd also like to pay my respect to the Ngambri and Ngunnawal people for welcoming me on this country, and to any elders present in the room today. Before we talk about metaphors and how I use these in the work, I'd like to give you a little bit of background to the project that I work in, which is 2 days a week. So the project's Healing Our Children, and we have two aims: to build the capacity of the community to respond to trauma, and to prevent trauma in children by reducing their exposure to violence and abuse. This is an early intervention and prevention project funded by the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet under the Indigenous Advancement Strategy, and it's been going for nearly 2.5 years, so our funding's coming to an end very shortly. Our target group is Aboriginal women who care for children, so they can be ideally pregnant women or those who have children under 3 years old. That's our key target, to catch these kids early in life. But we also welcome and work with children or women who have children that are older and have been exposed to trauma. Our vision is to increase the capacity of mums and caregivers to respond to their children in protective and nurturing ways in situations of violence or other trauma. Our evidence base is derived from theories and research from the field of neuroscience to explore the effects of trauma on the brain, and attachment theory to explore the effect on relationships. Our therapeutic approaches are up there: narrative therapy, art therapy, anti-oppressive practice, cultural safety, and metaphors and therapy. And our area where we work is 3 remote communities on the Tiwi Islands: Palmerston, which is a satellite city just out of Darwin, and more recently Katherine, about 3 hours from Darwin. A little bit about our activities. So each project in the community, in every community that we work, starts off with learning workshops. These usually go for about 2 to 4 days. And are opportunities for Aboriginal people in the community who are interested in learning about trauma and its effect on children from a theoretical and cultural perspective to come along and do some thinking around that and exploring around that. And the women that complete that workshop then have an opportunity to either be employed in the project or volunteer in our support groups. Our support groups are a 6-week program for our target group that I mentioned earlier. And the organic nature of this project has allowed for the development of other activities, things that we didn't even know would come out of it. An art project, social media messages, and developing some video stories to help spread our message. So although Relationships Australia, who I work for, is a mainstream organisation, the people working in it are largely Aboriginal. The group facilitators employed in communities, our peer mentors, our cultural advisors, our evaluation team, and our project ambassador are all Aboriginal people. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the values that underpin the project as well. And I see these core values as being most important. The first one, community development approach. Basically, the need for this project grew out of elders coming to us talking about the concerns they had about their grandkids, not respecting them, not listening to them anymore, self-harming, these kinds of things. which can be traced back to early childhood trauma. Empowerment. So we aim to empower women in communities with knowledge and confidence in having safe conversations with women in their own communities about domestic violence and its effect on kids. Two-way learning. This is incorporated in all aspects of our work. How we developed our resources, which are an incorporation of Western and cultural knowledge. The way we deliver our training, which is why I call them learning workshops, not training. The way we set up our group work, where everyone is a learner, including the facilitators. And even how we conduct our evaluation. And Tiwi people were the evaluators holding us accountable. Culture. For the Tiwi people, where we conducted our initial trial, culture was central to the project. It required us to be responsive and flexible to meet the needs of the community where they were at. For example, when group work didn't work in the community, we organised to take women out on a bush camp to do the program. And lastly, self-determination. It's probably not the last one, but it's probably one of the last of our core values. And it was important for us to employ local people to develop and implement the project for their own model. So keeping these values at the core of the work, it's no surprise, to me anyway, that metaphors have become such an integral part of the way we communicate in all our activities. So before I talk about the role of metaphors in our work, I just wanted to start with a definition. Wikipedia says, metaphor is a figure of speech that refers for rhetorical effect to one thing by mentioning another thing. Or in other words, it uses words in a way other than what is considered its literal or normal form. We use metaphors to communicate every day because they express ideas and emotions in ways that are easier to describe and are loaded with meaning. We do not interpret the literal meaning of what's expressed, but we get an image and we gain more insight into what that person is trying to say. So a few examples. It's like I'm wandering around in the dark, it feels like I'm drowning, or it's going to be a long journey to describe life's challenges. So, why use metaphors? In the world of therapy, metaphors have been described as a safe way for clients to communicate with the counsellor when they are looking inward and discovering some hard facts about themselves. Lou has described it this way: like the sugar that helps the medicine go down, the use of metaphor helps clients tolerate the unpleasantness that they may experience on their journeys to self-knowledge. The therapeutic literature talks about people who have been exposed to trauma finding metaphors useful because it's too difficult to talk directly about trauma in literal terms. It's also not necessary for people to talk directly about their trauma in order to facilitate recovery and healing. In fact, by forcing people to do so, we could re-traumatise them, and we don't want to do that. Susan Wiggum says, metaphors create a bridge between the ordinary world and the trauma world. So talking in metaphors is much safer for clients and also has huge therapeutic benefits and healing potential. Our learning experience in the project supports indirect communication over direct questions and using metaphors that Aboriginal people connect with and already use in their language and communication. To hear about the impact that violence has had or could have had on your own kids can be an uncomfortable realisation. But it can also be a wake-up call that stirs you into harder thinking and taking action. It's a difficult journey, but metaphors help us explore this in the most gentle, safe and least confronting way. So how did we come to use metaphors? The HOC project's grown out of my work as a children's counsellor and community worker on the Tiwi Islands. Part of my role was delivering healing family bush camps. With my background in narrative therapy, I started sharing the methodology called the Tree of Life. This comes from narrative therapy, which some of you are probably familiar with. And I shared this with key elders in the community. They were really interested in this way of working, so I trained up a few of the elders to facilitate this with children and carers on our bush camps, and they were doing that in language. The elders really took to the idea of using the metaphor of the tree to talk about their lives and the lives of their grandkids. They also started to use the language of storms, to talk about the struggles and the difficulties. It seemed very natural to use the bush around them as a platform to explore human life. So it's pretty early on in my role as a counsellor, working alongside an elder called Elaine Tipperui, when we started talking about a concern, I guess, that we had coming out of our work, and that was that we were seeing children in counselling and they were very often going back to unsafe environments. And Elaine believed that women in domestic violence relationships had very little understanding of the effect that the home environment was having on their children. For example, women who had their children removed by child protection didn't have an understanding of why their kids were taken away. In other words, they made no connection between a child witnessing domestic violence, the long-lasting effect that this can have on kids' development, and why it would be necessary to remove a child from that situation now. So Elaine was determined to find a way to have these conversations with women to increase their knowledge so that they might take more protective actions if violence broke out, and to try and reduce kids' exposure to that.
Help these young women, babies, young parts, then, and we realize that to understand all of the knowledge of the mums were having baby before, to pass it on to the young mums.
So what would it mean for you as a facilitator or someone helping with a group of women? What would that mean to you to be able to have that conversation?
Maybe more support for the young mums, because like me, I support the young mum, take them out bush, teach them everything, culture, cooking, hunting. This is how we can teach our mums, young mums, to understand how to survive.
So when you're out bush with the young mums and you've got trees around you, would that be a point in conversation where you can talk about, a damaged tree and the storms that come along and hurt trees, and that this happens in our lives too? We sometimes get blown over by the things that happen to us or the trauma. Could that open up a conversation to you out bush when you're with the young women out there, how to bring about healing in their lives?
That's if a mum comes along with us and sit where we sit, and we see a new tree shooting up, and we say, there's a new seed coming up to be going up as strong and healthy. Same to a baby. If you have a baby and he's looking at him, starting to grow, and you see the whole of the trees have got branches, leaves, and everything. And that's when we see the kids need to have clean body, but not really bad shoes, whatever. we need to look after those kids because trees are more important, not important, but it's showing us the way of life about kids growing up.
Ah. And what about, how would you have a conversation with a mum about maybe a damaged tree that you see and the sorts of things that harm trees and the sorts of things that harm children?
So when we look at trees growing up, and we see a lot of trees growing up as well, we can see the damage in the tree that's falling over, and we remember or reminder that the trees and the kids are not looking after them very well because the mums, you know, maybe don't really look after the kids. See the trees growing, the kids are the same too. They need to be grown strong and healthy.
In therapeutic conversations, metaphors can be used in two ways. They can be introduced by the client themselves, who may spontaneously start talking in metaphorical ways, or the therapist may suggest one that might be relevant and see if it connects with the client and their situation. Our project uses the latter approach. We've taken a metaphor that we've found worked well previously, and we're inviting women into a safe and non-blaming conversation. We draw on metaphors in all parts of our program to explain concepts in our two-way learning workshops, to engage clients in conversation about domestic and family violence in our support groups, in our video stories, social media, and we've even found ourselves using them in evaluation processes. In our two-way learning workshops, we use metaphors to teach and explore. So I've got a couple of examples. Concepts like the cycle of domestic violence is explored using the metaphor of a cyclone. This is particularly relevant for us up in the top end. We have the calm before the storm, the first warning signs of trouble, or the build-up to the storm itself, where the damage is done, and finally the clean-up phase. The cycle starts again with what we call the false calm. That's an attitude of complacency when we think that another big cyclone like this could never come and hurt us again. However, it's only a matter of time before the signs of build-up do come. In November every year, we're always on alert to danger. Our learning workshops also teach the basics from the field of neuroscience. The metaphor of a seed is used to explore the development of the baby's brain. Special care and protection of the seed is needed in order to grow a strong and healthy tree. Together, Elaine and I wrote the Seed of Life story. Different brain parts become countries, brain cells become communities, synapses become roads joining up communities, electrical currents become the message stick, and this brings neuroscience to life. And so the concept of trauma to the brain for children witnessing violence can be explored. Roads become blocked, the message stick can't get through, or the wrong message is delivered. Our Healing Our Children support groups consist of women who are sometimes in very vulnerable situations. So we take a gently approach from our first session. Stories about trees are used to orient the women to the space as we sit around the circle of life mat. If we're sitting outside, we might talk about the trees in the area. What are they used for? How are they used in their culture? Their favourite memories? We've gathered stories that can be shared, and we invite women to share their stories of what trees mean to them. We start to make connections with our own lives and what trees can teach us about living. For example, Stephanie Monongur from Yirrkala talks about family being like gardeners. She says, trees talk about the lives of people. The process of the growing tree is just like your human life. Trees can teach us about being together. When you see trees that are good and healthy looking, they produce nice looking healthy fruit. If husbands and wives are not happy together, their minds are separate, or they're hurting each other. Then they die. and don't make lovely fruits like the children. The only way you can have beautiful fruit is when parents are working together, thinking the right way. The life of the children can be beautiful, just like the health of the parents. To grow up strong and healthy, a tree needs the right food and the right gardener. Someone else in the family looking out for that tree when it's young. Gardeners are the people looking after the community and helping the people. Gardeners who serve the community must point people in the right direction that is good for them to live. Just like there are many ways of growing trees, there are different ways of raising kids. But there are good ways and bad ways. Gardeners offer protection, a place away from danger, a safe environment. Gardeners are good people surrounding you, watching you and helping you to grow the same way they look after trees. In our group work, over a period of 4 sessions, we explore the following ideas. Trees need lots of things to grow strong and healthy and productive, and so do our children. Trees get hurt by many different kinds of storms, so do our kids. The many different kinds of effects of storms in the lives of trees are not always seen. Just like the rings of a tree hide all the stories about that tree's life. We cannot always see the effects of storms on our children's lives. Trees have an amazing ability to recover, to heal, to regenerate once a storm has passed, but it takes time and often human intervention. The brain as a plastic organ can also heal, but it takes time and understanding and requires our human intervention. Trees have special skills and knowledge about how to protect themselves from further storms. Our children have built-in systems to take action, protect themselves and keep themselves safe. As families and communities, we have responsibilities to protect, care for and nurture the land, for if we don't, the land will make us sick. As families and communities, we have responsibilities to protect, care for and nurture our children, for if we don't, our people become sick. And finally, it takes a forest to raise a tree, just like it takes a family and community to raise a child. And Elaine loves this picture to talk about that. There's family there. The Tiwi Islands were considered the initial trial site for the HOC project, and we set out very early on to establish a review team consisting of 6 Tiwi community members who would oversee the evaluation process and work with our external independent evaluator. The process began with the evaluator exploring very basic concepts of what evaluation is and what it involves. It was very obvious to me after day 1 of our first workshop that people were struggling, given that English is their second language and they were very new to evaluation. After speaking with the evaluator about taking a different approach, we decided to go back to the tree. A giant tree was mapped out on large paper on the floor, and the evaluator stopped using big evaluation words that made their eyes glaze over. The seed came to represent how the project started out and a sharing of what had been achieved so far from an idea which was planted back in 2010. The program theory evolved into a conversation about having a sense of direction and making sure the seed was planted in the right place, facing the right way. Inputs became the food and nourishment that would bring the project to life, namely the Tiwi values that underpin the project and having the right people involved to care for it. Like the trunk of a tree, culture held this project straight and strong and proud. It was central to the work. The challenges of storms and what might bring the project undone was also discussed, and how these potential risks to the project might be overcome. The leads represented stakeholders, our supporters in the project. Project impact became bearing fruit the change Tiwi people wanted to bring about for their people and their community. Project outcomes and activities became reaching out with strong branches. The big branches became 2 broad aims, and the smaller branches our project activities to achieve these aims. The quality criteria, or how we would know if we were doing what we set out to do, became the tunga bag, full of healthy, good quality fruit sitting at the base of the tree. I think we're starting to get the picture of what this model or of evaluation looked like. An unexpected development out of this process was a request by the review team to engage an artist in the community to recreate their evaluation model in an artwork. The school recommended we approached Casimira Tipalura, a recent Year 12 graduate who was the first Tiwi woman to obtain an HR. And we got a small grant to contract Casimira to produce a screen print, which is, there's a picture here. The Tiwi model of Hock's program theory and logic came to be represented by the pinyama, or wild apple tree. The community saw it this way. The seed on the pinyama tree is like starting new life and new babies being born. It's about looking forward to a strong future with our strong families in strong culture. The tunga, full of good quality fruit, represents a good quality program that's good and healthy for our people. Casimira has gone on to become a young ambassador for the project. In her own voluntary time, she's helped us reproduce her artwork on t-shirts and bags as a fundraiser to go back into the project and to raise awareness in the communities where we work. Having just had her first baby a few weeks ago, Casimira agreed to produce some small videos in each trimester about safety and pregnancy. The pinyama tree lives on, spreading its message in subtle but important ways. Care for your baby's brain, just like you care for your country. I'm always looking for ways to extend therapeutic conversations through metaphors. It's become so much part of my life that I decided recently to meet another need that I'd identified through my work as a counsellor for kids and become an author. The Life of Tree is my own publication. This is a therapeutic picture book which aims to help children heal from their experience of trauma. In closing, I'd like to finish up with these words from Elaine. Trees can teach us a lot about how to live. Our traditional way of life is about caring for each other and growing strong families. Now there are storms destroying our families and hurting our children. We can see it's not a healthy life for our people. If you'd like to check out some resources, we have some free ones. If you go to our Healing Our Children Facebook page, we also have a website, which is up there, where there's some links. You can download the evaluation report that I talked about. I also have Seed of Life Story on DVD if you're interested in that, along with another story which was produced in Tiwi. And there's also a Yungamaka version. What else have I got? So obviously, yeah, I've got some t-shirts. If you'd like one of these and you'd like to spread the message about our project, come and see me afterwards. I've got a few bags. And, okay, bags are $8, t-shirts are $30. I've got some singlet tops, $25, and I've got a few of my books if you're interested in having a look at that. You can order these online as well. So, I've just got a few questions for you though, before you fire any questions at me. What challenges or unfilled needs are you being presented with in your work? What role can metaphors play in addressing that issue? How can you use metaphors to teach, spread a message, or talk about a difficult subject? What metaphors do clients already use in their talking with you that can be explored, played with, and used to address a broader social problem or community concern? Where is there room to explore the creative use of metaphor in your work? I encourage you to plant a seed, play, create and see what it grows. And finally, I need to thank the Northern Territory Government for getting me here. They partly sponsored me to come down.
Right, but what about our sponsors?